Okay, today we're going to cover exactly what are the additives that are in bread that might make you be feeling tired, anxious, depressed. We're going to look at all that, so stay tuned and listen to this broadcast. I'm Dr. Shirley, and I'm coming to you today to talk about gluten-free issues, about bread, and specifically I'm going to talk today about the additives that are in bread that you may not be aware of at all. Now, the first thing I want to talk to you about is added folate. Most flour is fortified with at least folate and sometimes B vitamins as well. A lot of countries have mandated this. Why? Well, in the past, there used to be a disease that babies got quite a lot called spina bifida. And this is where the spinal cord didn't close over properly. So very early in the pregnancy, when the fetus was just developing, the spinal cord went through a process where it folded over on itself and formed a circle. And sometimes that didn't complete. So the bottom end of the spine would be open. And this was called, sometimes it'd be open to the air. So you'd have a bit of the spine that was open to the air. Sometimes it just wasn't. It would be under the skin. And this was called spina bifida. So it split in two. It's rare now because we discovered years and years ago that the main reason for this was lack of folate in the mother's diet. So we started giving all women who are pregnant folate. And this has really got rid of the problem. So it is a great success story. Spina bifida now is quite rare. And most people know that as soon as they find out they're pregnant, they need to start taking folate. But the question is, what kind of folate is right for you? There are different kinds of folate. So most chemicals that we use in our body and in nutrition, there's different forms of it. It's not just one molecule. There's different kinds of the molecule. It can be like a mirror image. It can be cis or trans. There can be different, what we call isomers of the same chemical. So for example, vitamin C is a good example. When you eat a lemon or an orange, you're getting vitamin C in several different forms naturally. That's what happens in nature. And you absorb most of those forms as vitamin C into your body and you can use it straight away. But when you buy vitamin C tablets, you're getting just one kind of vitamin C. You're getting ascorbic acid. So you're not getting all the isomers, you're just getting the one form of the chemical. And that's fine. Vitamin C, not a problem. But with something like folate, it's a little bit more complicated. About 30% of the population have a gene that can interfere with the way that you absorb folate and break it down. This gene is called the MTHFR gene. It stands for methyl tetrahydrofolate. You don't need to remember that, but just the name describes what it does in the tin, basically. You've got two separate locations and you have a chromosome on each side. So that's 4 locations. So 2 genes, 1 chromosome each from your mum and dad. So that makes 4. So 4 possible sites where this gene can be faulty. And we call that, it's just one nucleotide. So we call it a single nucleotide polymorphism, or SNP. Again, you don't need to worry about these names, but just for some of you who know about this, it's a SNP SNP. 30% of the population of the world have this. So it's very common. It's usually not a problem. If you're eating green leafy vegetables and, plenty of spinach and parsley and all these things, you would never know that you have an issue with it. However, if you're getting a certain kind of folate, you might not be able to break it down and use it. Now, when they fortify the bread and flours and oats and all these things, they use a cheap lab-made version of folate called folic acid. Now, for most of the population, that's not a problem. But for people who have the MTHFR gene, it can be an issue. It's something that you can't break down very easily and utilize. Whenever they way back years ago, they decided they were going to add folic acid to everything to prevent spina bifida. They were concerned that people didn't take supplements. You go back to 1950 or before that, nobody took any supplements at all. You just ate food. And most of the time the food was great and you didn't need to worry about it. But now there was a lot of people who had malnutrition, who didn't eat enough food. There was a lot of people who were starving because they were poor and couldn't afford good food and didn't have access to good food. So they thought, okay, we're going to put folate in everything, and that way we'll get everyone. Everyone eats bread, so therefore everyone's going to get some folic acid. So it worked well in those days. But now what we've got is we've got a situation where some people are eating a lot of bread, they're eating a lot of oats and other grains, they're getting lots and lots of folic acid, which they cannot break down. Now that might not be a problem, but what happens is in your body, the process that uses folate is called methylation. And methylation is really important for DNA repair. It's really important for energy production. It's also really important to make brain hormones. So when things aren't working very well, your energy can be affected and so can your mental health. You're taking in lots of folic acid, which you can't break down. And so that sort of puts things out of balance. It puts your methylation out of balance. And I deal with this in my work every day. I'm always looking at people's methylation. How well is it going? Are things being pushed sideways? And then you start making chemicals which you can't really use. So sometimes people make a lot of histamine. And that can cause problems then with too many allergies and things like MCAS. Some of you may have that. Some of you may have heard of MTHFR gene. You may even have had yourself tested and you know status is, which is great. But there'll be a lot of you have never heard of this before. So have a look at it. I mean, there's a lot of stuff online already about the MTHFR gene. Now, so I just talked about one gene. There are some others which are closely related, like the MTRR and others. I'm not going to go into detail now because it would be too complicated. But just, it's not just the MTHFR on its own and that's the end of it. You really should be doing your whole profile so that you understand where there might be blockages in your methylation profile. And then you can supplement appropriately. If you're getting all of your folate from, say, spinach and parsley and other green leafy vegetables, it's not a problem because you're getting all the different kinds of folate, including a bit of folic acid from those vegetables. But because everything's in balance and you're getting all these different types, that's great. You'll be able to find some of that you can use in your methylation process. Great. But what happens is if you're eating a lot of bread and you're getting just folic acid, which you can't break down very easily, it's going to shift your methylation sideways, and that could cause problems. So it could cause fatigue, it could cause anxiety and depression because of the way that you're not able to process the folic acid. So this is where going to the doctor and getting these tests done can really help, because once you understand your profile, if you just have one gene out of the 4 and none of the other genes affected, well, you probably don't really need to worry about this. But if you've got more than one and you've got a couple of the other genes, then this could really affect how your body functions and your methylation process. And so it's good to know. Knowledge is power. So what I do is I do testing for a lot of my patients. You can get the MTHFR done in a simple blood test. But if you want to know all of your methylation genes, then you can get a DNA test done with a cheek swab. And that will tell you about all of these genes and tell you how much your methylation is affected by these issues. Now, if you have a methylation issue, then eating lots of bread and pasta that has lots of folic acid in it is not going to be good for you. Okay, it's going to create problems. So what's the solution? Well, if you take methylated folate, and some of you may be familiar with methylated folate and methylated B vitamins, you might already be taking methylated forms of these. And that's fine. That's going to balance up all the folic acid that you're getting from your bread. So you should be good to go. But if you're not doing that and you're not aware of what's going on, you could be feeling really sluggish, anxious, more allergies. It could be a whole lot of things going on in your body simply because you're eating lots of bread and getting lots of folic acid. And when I actually talk to people about how much they eat, people say, I don't eat much bread, but then I have 2 slices of bread in the morning, and then I have a wrap, and then I have pasta about 3 nights a week. It all adds up, and it keeps building up, and things then get further and further away from ideal. And especially if you're an athlete, you want to make sure that all of these chemicals in your body are working, tip top. You want to make sure your methylation, your energy production, your brain hormone, everything's got to be in tip top condition, because all these cycles work together like cogs in a clock. If you've got one cycle that's not working very well, it'll slow the whole thing down. And so you could feel quite tired, especially after eating a lot of bread, or the day after you've maybe had a big pizza or something, and wondering, why do I feel tired? Doesn't seem to be any reason for it. So keeping a food diary and noticing if you feel tired or depressed, like the day after that you've eaten a lot of wheat or oats, could be really helpful to indicate to you, okay, here's a problem. Now, I've talked in previous videos about lots of people having a problem with gluten, and it may be that there are people who don't have a problem with gluten, but they have a problem with the folic acid that's in the bread and in the pasta and in the pizza. It's vitally important that you understand these things and you know what your status is and how to fix things. Okay, so if you don't have a problem with gluten, but you do have a problem with folate, then maybe even just cutting back on the pasta and the bread might be enough, and taking some methylated folate and B vitamins. That might be all that you need to do to balance things up. But there are other things that are really necessary for that cycle, like zinc as well. So it's good to check your zinc status and make sure that all of these things are at the top, at the optimal level, not just at the bottom of the normal range, but at the optimal level, so that your body can function properly. And, if you're young and you're an athlete and you want to improve your performance, this could make the difference. This could speed up your times a little bit, give you more stamina, better recovery time. If you're a little bit older like me and you're thinking about longevity and health, this could make a huge difference to how you feel, being able to exercise, joint pain, brain function. There's a whole lot of reasons why this is a great thing to sort out. Okay, now I want to also talk a little bit about what other things are in the wheat flour and oats flour and all the other grains. So when you think about wheat and oats and quinoa and soy, these are all growing in these massive farms, massive monoculture farms. And sometimes the soil isn't that fertile. Sometimes they're growing on things like sand. And so it's not ideal. And they're trying to grow the same crop year after year after year in the farm. And we know that that's not a good idea, that the soil gets depleted. So they have to use lots of fertilizer to get these things to grow. And they have to use genetically modified types of these plants that are resistant to weeds, that are resistant to pesticides, that grow quickly, that grow all year round. They're constantly in the lab adjusting these plants. There's so much grain growing all over the world and people eating so much of this stuff. They've got to keep producing it. Genetically modified, grown in poor soil. So that means lots and lots of fertilizer and then lots of pesticides. So, glyphosate's one of the things that's used widely in these farms. But you've got other things. So when the grains are stored in grain silos, you get a lot of mold, so they spray fungicides as well. You get a lot of rats and mice who love to live in these grain silos, and so they've got a spray for them to get rid of the pests that are enjoying living in these silos. And then it's heavily processed, so it's cooked with heat, process these grains, and that destroys a lot of the natural folate and the natural B vitamins that are in the seeds. So all you're left with is the carbs. So you're getting a highly processed food that has very little nutrition in it apart from carbs, which are quickly broken down into sugar. So people don't think of eating bread and oats as sugar, but that's basically what it is. And then there's no other nutrition. You're getting as much nutrition out of the cardboard box it comes in as you are from the actual food itself. But supermarkets are full of boxes and boxes of these processed cereals and bags and bags of bread because people eat so much of it. So you can see why maybe this isn't a good idea that I'm eating so much of this stuff. So that's some of the additives that are in it, and a little bit of information about the process of how this is grown and then made into the breakfast cereals that you have on your breakfast table in the morning. Now, there's other things that are added to it as well. So they add a thing called a bread improver, which helps in the process of making mass-produced loaves. And it often has aluminium in it. Aluminium is not great for us. It's a heavy metal. It can be toxic. It's associated with early dementia. It's associated with high blood pressure. It's hardening of the arteries. And there is research that shows that in some breast cancers, some people have a high amount of aluminium in their breast tissue. It's also used in antiperspirants. It is in the water supply, so aluminium is used as a flocking agent to gather debris in water supply, so you might have some aluminium in your water. And there may be aluminium in the air if you're in an area where there's cloud seeding going on, because they often use aluminium or silver iodide to spray in the air to precipitate rain. You could be getting lots of aluminium from different sources, so you don't want extra aluminium in your bread and in your breakfast cereal if you can help it. Those are things to think about. Do I really need to eat this much bread? Can I eat something else instead? And luckily, there's lots of other alternatives that you can have. So you can have rice, you can have rice cakes, rice noodles, you can have potatoes. Lots of things you can do with potatoes to make them nice, and they can still be healthy. And then things like sweet potato and yams and pumpkin, celeriac. There's a lot of different vegetables that you can use that are like bread that will give you the carb part of your meal. And even some people, what are doing now, are slicing pumpkin or sweet potato and cooking a little bit, and then you can grill it to make it appear like a slice of toast, and then you can put your additives on top. You can put your poached egg and your avo for your breakfast in the morning. So it's not like you have to be miserable. There are lots of ways that you can enjoy life without eating so much bread. Now, I know it's difficult. I know bread is so tasty and very tempting. I grew up in a country where there was so many different kinds of bread. You could do a bread walking tour around the city I was born in. So we all love bread and everybody ate lots of it. But we know that it doesn't suit everyone. It doesn't suit everyone to eat so much bread and for it to be your main carb. Now we know that, for example, in Ireland we had the potato famine back in the 1800s because in those days, there were so many potatoes being grown that everybody relied on potatoes for their main carb. When that failed, people were starving. There wasn't enough wheat to go around. And similarly now, we're relying on wheat to feed so many people in the world. If there's a problem with wheat, then people don't know what to eat. They're sort of stuck because they've always ate lots of bread. This happened in France during the French Revolution. they actually brought in a law to say that bread had to be available for everyone because a lot of people were starving because they relied on bread so much and there wasn't enough to go round. Ukraine is a country that grows a lot of wheat, and so the war there has created problems with wheat supplies for many countries around the world. It's not good to rely on one grain or one source of carbs. We've got to mix it up a little so that when something happens and you don't have a good supply, you can switch over to something else. Luckily, most of us have access to a good supply of potatoes, a good supply of rice, and a good supply of grains as well, like wheat and oats and quinoa. We're lucky that we have choices. And so you've got to look at your diet as mixing it up a little bit so you can switch. Like if you have a problem with gluten, you can switch to potatoes, you can switch to rice, which very rarely gives people problems. And if you go back through my previous videos, then you'll see a lot of information about why people have problems with gluten and the other grains and why things like rice are much easier tolerated because of the protein and the amount of protein. So please go back and look at the previous videos to get more information. Okay, so I've given you a lot of information in this video already, but what I hope I've done is also give you enthusiasm that you can do this. You can change your diet. You can rely less on bread and pasta and pizza. You can look for alternatives and enjoy them and still have fun with food and enjoy eating without feeling that you're depriving yourself, and also what supplements you might be able to source to help you out with this problem. But what I would advise is that you go to your doctor and get tested. Get tested for your MTHFR to see if you have a problem or not. Maybe you don't have a problem at all. Maybe you're part of that lucky 60% of the population that doesn't have a problem with these genes at all. That's all the information I want to give you at the moment. Be creative with your diet. It doesn't always take a long time to cook at home and cook some of these delicious foods rather than relying on takeouts all the time and fast food. So think about your body as a fantastic engine, like a Porsche. I mean, the human body is absolutely amazing. You know, we're trying to replicate it, but we're not there by any means. I don't know if you saw recently the robot games where they had robots who were competing in like an Olympics, and there was a lot of problems. So we've come a long way with robots in terms of what they can do physically, but there's still nowhere near how good a human body is in terms of movement and performance and brain performance and creativity and all those wonderful things that you could do if you're able to eat right and get all the nutrients that you need. Stay tuned to listen to. I've got lots more information to give you, so keep subscribing and turning on notifications so you get more information about how to improve your health, no matter what age you are. So thanks for listening.